Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Bennett talking to you from Fredonia High School. I'm so excited to share this presentation with you on what band will look like during the COVID-19 pandemic for our in-person learners returning to the hybrid model. We cannot wait to welcome back our 6th through 12th graders who've decided to return to school for in-person instruction. Many of the most important parts of playing in a band are going to stay the same. The things that your children know and love will still be there. But there are many considerations and modifications we've had to make sure that we're still rehearsing and learning in the safest environment possible. While this presentation has a great deal of information, please, please, please do not hesitate to contact Mr. Mallory or myself with any questions you might have. An important note to our high school families that on the first 2 days of hybrid learning on November 23rd and November 24th, there will not be any music materials needed for these meetings. We'll be distributing music and materials that we have for the students and reviewing procedures. This will all lead up to full in-person playing rehearsals, the classes immediately following Thanksgiving. This presentation is broken up into 4 sections. Section 1, things that are staying the same. Section 2, things that are changing. Section 3, what will rehearsal look like? And Section 4, the remote students band experience. Now, think of this as like a table of contents. So, if you want to jump to one section later, just click on the section title. It'll take you right there. While this won't work in the video, it will work in the Google Slides presentation version of this that I've shared in the email that you received the video with. So you can always refer to this anytime you want if you want a specific piece of information from a certain section. We'll start with Section 1, things that are staying the same. Many of the things that our students have come to know and love about band are staying the same. They'll still be performing together if they selected in-person instruction. They'll still be expected to practice at home at least 4 days a week. They'll still have lessons in some way. And students will still be responsible for bringing their materials back and forth from school to home. And I should add, they'll still be having a great time learning and making music together. Now this section is the largest of the presentation, things that are changing to ensure that our students can make music again safely. So the following section is based on the latest scientific research and information from the New York State Department of Health. As with many things during this period in history, things are constantly changing and in flux. If/when more research comes out and or the government changes its guidelines, know that we will adapt accordingly and inform our families of any changes. Our students' health is our top priority. A lot of questions have come in about lessons. Right now, we're still trying to figure out what the exact structure of lessons are going to look like, but I can guarantee that your families will not be receiving less lesson instruction than you are now. So at a minimum, families will still be receiving one remote lesson every other week. We've got some really neat ideas for new experiences for our students for the rest of the year on remote lessons, and we can't wait to share those, but at a later date. Most of this presentation will detail what is necessary for students to rehearse and make music together in person. The biggest change for students is the social distancing requirements. Our woodwind and brass musicians are going to be spaced 12 feet apart. That means that each of these students will have 144 square foot performing space around them. Essentially imagine each student having 2 queen mattresses worth of space around them. Our percussionists will be spaced 6 feet apart like they'll be spaced for their other classes, so they'll have a 36 square foot performing space around them. These space requirements mean that our individual cohorts will be rehearsing in the auditorium because we can't fit any of our cohorts in the band room under these guidelines. We can only fit about 11 students in the band room with these guidelines. Students are going to be spread throughout the entire auditorium. So that means we'll have some students on stage, in the pit, and amongst the seats. Now, seating priority is going to go for students with large instruments. So many students who are standing in the aisles are going to have to stand during rehearsal. But when I'm not working with their specific section, they're more than welcome to sit in what is essentially a much more comfortable seat than some of the other students are going to have who get to sit the whole rehearsal. Now, there are many materials that our students will need to bring for each rehearsal or in-person music making experience. What is going to be a big change for some of our students is no student is allowed to share materials for band anymore. Now, this includes instruments, to sticks, to so many other things. In the past, if a student would forget something, usually we could lend them something and they can participate in rehearsal. That is simply not possible with our virus control measures that we have to institute. So this means students will have to no longer bring their own stand. And I want to share that first because I know Fredonia students, when we've talked about this before, we have been stressing that you'll have to bring your own folding music stand. Well, luckily we've been able to work through some changes with our custodial staff, who's been incredibly helpful. You will no longer have to bring a stand for rehearsals. You will have a music stand with your name on it that will help you to know where you're going to stand or sit for each rehearsal. But I just want to stress that you no longer have to bring your folding music stand from home. You will have to bring the music you receive back and forth to each and every rehearsal because we cannot provide extra parts for students anymore. And where in the past, if you forgot your music, you were sitting next to someone else who played your part and you could play that part, that's going to be much more difficult with your next closest student being 12 or 6 feet away from you. Facial mask will be worn at all times except for our brass woodwind players when they are playing. But the mask a student will be wearing for their other classes will work just fine. If your student would prefer, or your family would prefer them not to take their mask on or off while playing, I've linked a mask that I really highly recommend that's specifically designed for wind musicians. I used one at a recent gig that I had to play and I was very impressed. Essentially it has magnets on it and you lift up a flap. You stick the mouthpiece of the instrument in, and then the magnets flap down to seal around that hole. Again, if you really want to see it, I'd click that link. It's a pretty neat mask. Also, some families have expressed interest in making similar masks on their own. The link that you see that says they can also make one by following the steps will take you to a tutorial video that would help you make one of these masks at home. Again, though, that is not required. Students will just have to make sure they're wearing the mask anytime they're talking or not playing. But those are some other options if you'd like to explore them on your own as a family. If your student uses a playing mask, just make sure to replace it with your regular mask for your other classes. The school has purchased bell covers or wind defenders for all brass and woodwind instruments. Now you'll see some pictures here of a trumpet and a clarinet, each with the bell covers. This has been recommended by the most recent research studies as essentially creating like a mask for our wind instruments. For flutes, though, we've recommended these wind defenders that you also see a picture of. Now these will all be school-owned property. Each student will be issued one at their first in-person rehearsal, and then at the end of the year, depending on where we are with the COVID situation, either these will be returned, or if it looks like they might be necessary for the following year, students will hold on to them and return them either when this is over or they graduate. But hopefully it's over well before then for most of our students. If a student forgets any of these elements, bell cover, mouthpiece, instrument, sticks, face mask, music, we will not have extras, and just saying again, they will not be able to play that day. So definitely this will be a good test for our students on their personal responsibility. So there are some instruments that have different circumstances than others. But the key is, if in the past you forgot a flute or your clarinet, we could lend you a school instrument. That is simply not possible this year. All of our supply is committed to other students. Certain students will be permitted in the band room, but most students will carry their instruments or put them in their locker. If your instrument does not fit in your locker, you can put it in the high school library computer lab, but it must be picked up at the end of the day. And that's something you're going to be hearing from a lot of your teachers for all your classes. Every day, all of your material should be going home with you. So there's no situation where you're leaving an instrument or music here for your next in-person day. Everything goes home with you, and really that should be for all your classes, just so you're prepared if we ever have to go remotely with no warning. So if your student musician plays the following instruments, they must transport them back and forth between school and home. And again, I'm just trying to make the point that these instruments cannot be left at school overnight. Flute, oboe, clarinet, saxophone, bassoon, trumpet, and this is the big one, percussionists. You must bring sticks and mallets. We're going to talk about this a little more with your parts, but there will be no sticks or mallets to borrow. So whatever sticks or mallets you're using at home for practice on your bell kit and your practice pad, those should be coming with you. We prefer in a labeled stick bag, but as long as you have a way that you're keeping them safe, you'll be all right. Now, there are some instruments that either students have been issued one for home and for school, or they're too large to be transported on the bus. For these students, you are the only students that are allowed to enter the band room, and you will have a school instrument at the building waiting for you. Now, I should stress that in the past, for example, some of our instruments were used by 3 or 4 different students over the course of the day. To keep our COVID procedures intact, we were able to secure donations and find some extra instruments, so that is not the case. If you are using a school French horn at school, you are the only student who is using that horn, period. So that's another reason why we're really trying to limit the number of students in the band room, because some of the space has been taken up for storage. So if you're one of these students, we do expect you to bring your mouthpiece back and forth to each rehearsal. Some families have expressed, could we get a second mouthpiece and leave one in the case of the school instrument? We're absolutely fine with that, because again, your student is the only one using this instrument, but we leave that completely up to you. What's going to be important, though, is that if they don't have a mouthpiece that they're bringing with them, they're not going to be able to play. And we just want to make sure that they're also bringing that mouthpiece home, so that if we did suddenly go remote, they would have it to complete their assignments at home and practice. So the instruments in this category are the French horn, the trombone, the baritone/euphonium, and the tuba. Some other safety precautions that we're taking: hand sanitizer will be available for students on their way into class. Now, this is a fun one. Brass players need to find a way to collect their condensation. Brass players instruments are a living physics experiment, I should say by a science experiment. Every time they blow warm air and it meets the cold air in their instrument, it makes a little cloud, it makes some rain, some condensation. One of our safety precautions is students can't leave that on the floor. So the most cost-effective solution we found to this, and I give full credit to Mr. Mallory for coming up to this, is some generic baby diapers. So we have a large supply of baby diapers here, and each rehearsal, brass players will be issued one. They'll be very careful. Their condensation goes directly into the diaper, and at the end of rehearsal, as they're walking out, they will throw their diaper away. Certainly, this is a time to remember. So the other thing I'll say is, thanks to our wonderful custodial staff, our playing areas will all be sanitized nightly. So what will a rehearsal look like? Section 3. Before school, students will make sure they have their instrument, mouthpiece, sticks, music bell cover, and mask. Forgetting any of these will prevent a student from playing during a rehearsal. Students will bring all of this to their first period class with them. Band is second period. So, after first period ends, students will come down to the auditorium with their materials. One door will be marked for entering and one for dismissing. Please use these carefully. Students will enter the aud with their materials. Brass players will also pick up their daily diaper. And students who need large instruments will go to the band room first to get those and open their cases in the band room, so they're just coming in with the instrument. Smaller instruments, bring your case in so you can open it there. Students will sit/stand at their assigned seat near their labeled stand. These will be the same at all rehearsals for the foreseeable future. So we won't be randomizing, where you are in the auditorium. Once you find your spot on that first day, unless the cohorts change in the future, that will be your spot for the duration. We will tune, warm up, and rehearse as a group. This is going to be a big change for us. No student can play until told so by Mr. Bennett, because we need to make sure that everyone is in position and that every instrument has their bell cover on, and just so we can help control the aerosol movement. After rehearsal, students will pack up. Those going to the band room will be dismissed first, so they have some extra time to put things away. And after rehearsal, instruments that can fit in a locker will be returned there, and those that cannot will be left in the high school library's computer lab. But again, remember, for almost all of our band members, you will not be going into the band room this year. I want to make sure everyone understands that big change. Students will leave school each day with all of the materials they came in with. Nothing should be left here overnight. We should always be operating as what happens if we go remote on the next day. So for our students that have chosen to stay remote, this is the section you've been waiting for. Here's what band will look like for you. So you are still a member of our band, and we're still so excited to have you participating. Remote students will be zoomed into rehearsals with their in-person peers. We've talked to some band directors who have done this, and we have some neat strategies to make that the best experience it can be for you. But you'll still be rehearsing with your peers. You'll just be doing it at home. The expectation is that you'll participate in all these classes as if you were actually in the room rehearsing with us. Remote students will still receive lessons, either with likewise remote students or by zooming into instruction with in-person peers if there are in-person lessons. I want to stress that we're all in this together. We're living through a momentous era in history. Things are going to change, but no matter what the next few months bring, no matter whether your child is remote or in person, I am confident that this is going to continue to be a great year. So I'll thank you for your time. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or dare I say compliments, feel free to contact Mr. Bennett, that's me, using the information there, or Mr. Mallory using the information there. And as always, our website is a wealth of information. Please, again, don't hesitate to contact us with any questions or concerns, and we're very excited to see your students again soon. Have a great day.